this podcast.
The man of the hour.
Me.
He is an amazing paleontologist. We have the amazing Zach Hawk Reed.
Yeah! My guy Zach, yo.
Thank you. You didn't include things like my unpaid parking ticket.
You know, your mugshot did come up, but no, stop.
I was about to say, who am I sitting next to?
Welcome, though.
Yeah,
Thank
man,
you
welcome
guys
to
for
the
having
show. Yeah, brother.
So I was born in Chicago, grew up there my entire life. Basically, the only time you could get me out of the house was to either go to watch wrestling, MMA, or to go to the Field Museum. Like, my grandmother loathes me because when the grandkids would get together, she's like, what do we all want to do? Field Museum! Oh, God, the same thing. Nothing's changed. I'm like, I don't care, dinosaurs.
Yes.
And so as I got older, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I went out to Montana. That's where I got my undergrad in earth sciences with a concentration in paleontology.
Oh, nice.
And then met my wife there. We dated a little bit, then we didn't date. And then I went back to Chicago because I got burnt out with school. Decided to become an MMA fighter for a little while. And then
Right?
I was like, oh, shit, I'm not that good, so I need to get back to my actual career. And so I actually called her up one day and I was like, hey, how do I get back into the field? And she's like, hey, there's a conference in Canada. Come up this way. I'm like, you do know I'm going to just be your shadow the whole time. And she's like, yeah, I don't care. Come on, follow me. We went up and at that conference I discovered, some programs I could go to, everything else. Went to South Dakota for a summer at the mammoth site. So it's an active dig site that mammoths are in. So there's,
Very interesting.
Man-
Oh, my God.
Can
Oh, my
I
God.
write that down somewhere? I want to.
yeah, it's in Hot Springs, South Dakota. Mammoth Hot Springs.
So it's actually
Or sorry, it's a mammoth site in Hot Springs, South Dakota.
So it's currently still active now?
Well, no, mammoths aren't still.
No, I'm talking about the dig site. I'm talking about the dig site.
Yes, the dig site's still active. It was found in the 70s. Essentially, they were building a condominium up there, and a bulldozer dug in, pulled up, and the top of a mammoth skull came up. And one of the guys worked at was at one of the local universities, was like, hey, I recognize this. Brought his professor out there. They dug it up. The contractor basically was like, hey, I'll give you the summer. See how many you can pull out, because in the United States, if you find either archaeological stuff or paleo stuff, you're kind of required to tell people. Museums come out, they collect them, then they go, okay, that's all that. You can build your condo or whatever. But as they kept getting deeper into the layers, they're like, oh, shit, there's another one. Oh, shit, there's another one. And
So there's like a whole colony of it,
so
basically.
I'm going to screw up the number, but there's at least 62 mammoths they've found so far. Different parts of them, tusks, teeth, but
That's
at least
wild.
62 confirmed individuals. The field site
This
is
is so
maybe
fucking cool.
a third excavated. So there's a whole layer, like whole ton down, because it's in very soft sediment, and bones have different densities depending on what environments they were put into.
This is so fucking cool.
And because the mammoth site was in a hot spring, they go through a fossilization process. Fossilization is where a bone basically goes from being a bone to a rock. The stuff that makes up your bones, your calcium, all that gets pulled out. Minerals get put in, and then it gets that hard rock kind of.
But doesn't it? Sorry, and this is just me being a geek at the moment. But doesn't that also kind of makes the bone be fragile to shatter?
Yeah, so that's actually where I was going. Some of them hard as stone. I could kill a man with some of these.
Oof.
But with the mammoth site, because none of those minerals came back in, it was in what's called clay or mudstone, so it's really, really soft. So the bones, if you put too much weight on them, will just shatter. And then it's like the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. And so they're going through that site with things like tongue depressors and small, very soft things so it doesn't like destroy or disturb the sediment or anything like that. But yeah, so that site is only like a third excavated, so we don't even know what's below
Underneath that, yeah.
And they found things like camel bits, not whole things, but they found like camel teeth. They found the thing behind me, the giant short-faced bear. There was a skull there. When I was there, I took out a humerus, so the upper arm bone.
Oh.
So
That
they've
was gonna be
got
my
tons of
follow-up.
cool
What
stuff.
did you find when you were there?
So all I found were some fossilized rabbit tracks. So,
Okay.
but like the site's so active, I became kind of one of the guys who they were like, "Hey, Zach has ADHD. Let's just put him with a podcast, and he'll fix the like mammoth tusks because it's the most time-consuming thing."
So I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
Jerry just pulled up the site, and it said that there was 61 confirmed fossils there.
Mm-hmm.
It says that there's 58 Colombian and 3 woolly mammoths. how exactly do you determine the difference between a Colombian mammoth and a woolly mammoth simply from the bones?
So
One
yeah,
of them is like,
but if you actually look on the picture there, that's a Colombian mammoth. So they're a lot taller. So they have longer limbs, broader shoulders. They're a bit taller than the woolly mammoth. Woolly mammoth, by its name, has fur on it. It's a little shorter, stockier. You can also tell the difference based on the teeth they have. So if you look at mammoth teeth, unlike us where we have like a whole line of dental, or dentition, I should say, mammoths have these like shoe pads that are like grinding teeth because all they eat grasses.
I pulled up.
Yeah, so
Well, you
I didn't even know there was different kind of mammoths.
yeah,
I
so
thought it was all woolly.
I thought it
mammoths.
was just
It
woolly.
there's
crazy.
a whole different, and then you don't even get out to California. There's a thing called a pygmy mammoth.
What's that?
So basically,
Wow.
Pick me.
yeah,
I'm gonna,
I was just about
I'm
to
gonna
say
take a
that.
wild guess and say it's very small.
yes. So pygmy mammoths are basically anything can go through pigmentization. Is they get isolated enough. So you have these so Asian elephants are roughly about the same size, or African elephants are the same size as a woolly mammoth. Colombians are a little bigger, but when they get onto this little island off the coast of California, they're the only thing there, and it's small food supply. So over their generations, they
Island
slowly,
dwarfism.
Yep, they slowly reduce their body size to make sure that they are still survivable on that island.
Interesting.
That's exactly what that's called, island dwarfism.
Yep.
And,
So-
and small things actually get big.
Really.
No.
So I'm glad you
Every
brought up
time.
fur. All right. So a couple episodes ago, or was it? I believe it was season 1. We were talking about how me personally, I don't think that feathers can be fossilized. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, they can.
They can. Okay, so I wasn't aware of that.
It's a 50-50 shot. You can either have the fossilized actual like imprints of the feathers, or it's just an what's called a trace fossil. Paleontology just splits fossils into different categories. Body fossils, like the skull behind me, that's anything like a vertebrate or an invertebrate, so bugs or creepy crawlies, that gets left behind. Trace fossils are things like the footprints you'll see sometimes, or one thing that I've got is it's called coprolite, so it's fossilized poo. But those help because those actually do tell us like things like diet and everything. But feathers and those can be considered both either a body fossil or a trace fossil because there'll be like an impression left.
What's the difference between paleontology and archaeology?
Oh, that's the paleontology is basically the study of ancient life through fossil remains or any kind of remains of that animal, whereas archaeology is the study of pretty much modern humans. Now, there's a middle ground that's called paleoanthropology that covers things like Homo habilis, the Cro-Magnon, Neanderthals.
Dolls,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, going back to what I was saying though, like the reason I asked about if fossils were, if feathers were fossilized, was because, yo, I don't think nobody can tell me that a T-Rex didn't look like a big ass chicken, bro. Like it's.
So we haven't found a T-Rex, but if Jerry, you want to pull it up, there's a thing called a Eutyrannus. So it's the largest tyrannosaurid that's ever been found to have feathers. So it's like 9 meters long. So
Really?
quick math here: 9 times 3, 27 feet or 27.
Here you
feet long.
Utyrannus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
why? How come every time? Well, I don't know if it's every time, but when you guys find a bigger version of something, it's called the Utah. Like, cause there's a Utah raptor, correct?
So when so a lot of people think like when we do name classifications, there's like a lot of effort and thought. Someone named a relative of the Pachycephalosaur, the hard-headed one,
Yeah.
after Hogwarts. So like scientists, they'll stick to the genus and the more technical names, but the species specific name, my goal as a kid, if I ever found one, was going to either be named after Godzilla or his best friend Anguirus from the Godzilla movies. I'm naming him after kaiju. That's what I'm doing.
Every fire.
There's also a kaiju in anime. Just saying.
And how do you figure out if you've discovered a new bone?
So that's a long, long process, especially if you find something that's been very well looked into or researched. You basically have to go through every paper, do measurements, you got to cite reference materials. It takes years for fossils to be announced. I'm trying to think.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's one that it just got announced like a couple years ago or so, but
No,
it was
there's
like
one
first
in
discovered in like
Brazil.
2014.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah, in Brazil.
Yeah, okay.
And so the crazy story about that is that they found the fossils and they left it in a storage bin, and it was only until like I forget what it is, like a researcher, like a young researcher, brought it out of storage that they're like, oh shit, this is a new thing, but it's been in storage for the past like 10 years.
Wow.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
look it up. But I have the reference picture of the Utasaurus here.
Yeah,
If Zach wants to show what the feathers
Yeah,
look
so
like.
Utyrannus, so you can see it on like the tail and stuff like that. That's
Was it found in Utah, like the raptor was?
So no, Utah Raptor was in
That's
Utah.
why-
It's named after the state it's found in. Utyrannus,
yeah.
I don't remember off the top of my.
It's Y-U-T-Y, love, not like Utah.
Oh,
State.
no, because the Utah raptor was found in Utah. That's why
Right.
they call it that.
But this is
That's
why
a
you.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
That's
is
more
why-
like the your Tyrannus.
Like you? Yeah, but this is what like a rendition of what it
Yeah.
could have looked like.
Feathers. You see,
Yeah,
it looked like a big ass chicken. That's
hold
what I'm
on,
that
saying.
He said a
So-
chicken.
That doesn't look
So
like
there's a couple.
feathers.
So there's a couple different types. We found them with like actual feathers. So that's like your Archaeopteryx. If you pull up one, it's called either Confucianornis or Microraptor. That actually preserves the pigment, and it's super cool. It's actually how we learn about how color evolved over millions of
Wait,
years.
what do you mean
So
by
dope.
like if you observe the pigment like on the fossils like colored?
Yeah, so that mineralization process I was talking about, as those minerals get replaced, they have a chemical reaction. So if you see certain bones that are like red, that means they were in an iron-rich environment. If you see something that's black, it was more of a carbon-rich environment. So like if, say Cece got preserved right now, she's got a plant behind her.
It's gonna be yellow.
That fossil is going to actually make her bones black because there's so much carbon and organic material. So those things like those feathers can get preserved, and you get those colors. And through way higher level of research than I am comfortable talking about, they do basically examinations and discover like the wavelength that made the color of that feather. So we know that there were like basic blacks and reds and blues. It wasn't like someone
How
had
do you,
a.
wait, so how do you like identify that? Like purely identify those colors? Is it like just the materials that?
So they'll take that material, and I definitely am going to be speaking out of school here, but there's things like X-ray diffraction. There's different like chemical and physics-based like analyses they can do, so they can shoot light into them and how it bounces around. They can measure it out,
Okay.
and they're like, okay, it has this wavelength, so it's black. And even
Okay.
though it's preserved black, they're like confirmed it's black. So
If correct me if I'm wrong, they just recently discovered that velociraptors are covered in feathers or something like that, right? And they were like,
Yeah.
and they're like the size of turkeys or some shit.
a lot of raptors. So there's a couple different types of raptors. You've got like your Utah raptor, which
Yeah.
is one of the bigger ones. You have Deinonychus, which was the one that in Jurassic Park. That's what they're based off of.
Yeah.
But
That's so cool. That's a
velociraptors
cool
were about the
name.
size of like a really pissed off chicken.
Eh? You feel me? With the chickens? Eh?
So-
now you could have kicked
So
it.
yeah, so
like low key.
I don't think he was kicking a dinosaur again.
Oh no,
Nah,
you
if
could
it
have
was
it
chicken
would have been like
size,
a
you
corgi.
definitely
You could have
could've-
just punted it. It would have been fine.
Oh, never mind.
Okay,
All
so
right.
See, that's
So then the question,
wild.
okay, so the question is this: 100 of those versus a man.
They win. Because they still have serrated claw. They have the hook claw. They have serrated teeth. Yeah,
All right, 100 men versus one velociraptor. Who's winning?
100 men.
All right, we in there, we in there.
Oh, okay,
You hear that?
okay.
We could beat dinosaurs, ladies.
And some of these could run up to 30, 40 miles an hour. So
Oh,
they're
no.
moving the speed of
Like an ostrich.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was your average dinosaur that lived in New Jersey?
So you guys actually have the distinction of having one of the first complete dinosaur skeletons ever found.
Pictures, you heard pictures.
Yo, we be going digging. You feel me? Stop playing with us.
So you have what's called hadrosaur. I think it's called Hadrosaur falci, but it's a hadrosaurus. So it's a plant-eating, duck-bill type dinosaur.
The Garden State, you heard? It gets
Okay,
Jurassic out
better
here.
yet, this is gonna be a two-parter.
Hey, it's better than what I got. I got what's called the Tully monster. It's like
The Tully monster?
so it's a small. It's really cool because it looks like something you would find in a video game, like that deep sea dive game, and you're like.
Uh-huh.
Eyes are like a tube. It's got a claw hand.
yeah, so I pulled it up right here for you guys.
Yeah,
to see.
so if you go for the like graphic image, you can see what it is.
Hold on.
Oh,
You
why
talk
does
about
it look
this
like
one?
a squid?
So it has a really cool distinction because it
So, is that a neck? Is that his neck?
That scares
no,
me.
that's like its mouth. It's like a
Makes me
mouth hand kind of
uncomfortable.
thing.
No, that
A
makes me
mouth
uncomfortable.
hand?
Yeah,
So
and
it
then
swims
those
like-
two
so it
things
swims like
sticking
this.
off, those are its eyes.
No.
So
No.
it sounds like this.
What?
To be fair, they're the
fuck?
size of like a baked
Yeah.
potato, so you're fine. And if you, unless
A
you were
baked
living,
potato.
It was almost so it's almost like an insect kind of thing.
yeah. So that's where I was going. It's got a cool little factoid. It's when it was found in Illinois because
So the mouth is in West Bubblefuck while the eyes are
Yeah.
in East Hanover.
oh
Got
yeah,
it.
the Paleozoic, which is where like trilobites and horseshoe crabs and all the invertebrates come from,
Yes.
was
Pokemon.
just God was on LSD.
So this is a different one. So it has the fossil and the graphic design.
thank you.
thing.
Yeah, so that was found in Illinois because in the U.S., when dinosaurs were running around, we had what was called the Cretaceous Seaway, or the westward inland sealand, or something like that. But it basically was the middle of America, where all of the Midwest is, was all ocean, like deep ocean.
No shit.
And those things were swimming around, and
That would be creepy.
there are some nopes.
So
on
how
there.
does something like that get found if it was that big? That was the rock that it was found in?
So it was found in Illinois. We are one of the bigger exporters of limestone because limestone is made from ocean beds that eventually over time were turned into rock. Yeah. So
Yeah, hold on. So this is what.
What?
Isn't like
so
The
you can see at the
limestone
like
thing?
little bottom area where Illinois
Yo, we're
is.
all
that's it.
interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It really is.
So in
Is that why that area is like flatlands?
somewhat you also have the glaciers, and that's what
Yeah.
you can see, like that's where the Great Lakes come from. That's glaciers just carving as they slow creep across the United States and Canada for millions of years.
Yeah.
Damn, that's pretty cool.
But Illinois has a shit ton of limestone. Back in the turn of the 20th century, we had the World's Fair in Chicago, and that's when all the rich people were like, we got to make Chicago look great and not have murder. So they made basically Lakeshore Drive, where our planetarium is, the Field Museum, all that.
Yeah, and then they threw 1 million ducks into the river. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they dyed it green.
Yeah, which is weird.
But they they brought all this limestone up because they wanted it to look like, the Colosseums and the Greek or Greek, what is it, Archimedean, whatever, the Greek structures.
Yeah.
And so they brought all this limestone, and in Illinois, everyone's like, oh, we just want the slabs. Well, all this discarded stuff, the gentleman who found it, I think his name was Tully, basically was going through the scraps and he was finding it, and he's like, hey, can I keep that? And then he found 100+ specimens and was like, this is a whole new confirmed species. Oh, sorry. And then as the he started doing more research into it, and now in the modern era, they looked at a scan of one of its fossils, and they find what we call a protospine. So there's debate right now of whether it's considered an invertebrate, so things like shrimps and all that, or if it's one of our earliest recorded instances of a spine, a vertebrae. So your really great times 1,000 grandmother was that.
How many full skeletons have you guys found?
Oh god. If I was to do a number off the top of my head, I think there's 250,000 or so fossils that have been discovered.
But
full, I would not know off the top of my head.
Okay,
honestly.
I got you.
well, let's
Because we also used to have more, and then things like World War II happened, and shit got blown up. We had Spinosaurus since 1913, and then a bunch of,
they actually got lost.
awesome people wanted to
Degenerates,
blow it up.
yeah.
A guy who got kicked out of art school didn't like everybody, so yeah.
And never to be
But-
recovered again.
No, so there are fossils being found, but now they're not as full or
Full.
articulate.
Is there a way to I mean, obviously you can't back up fossils because they're fossils when you have one set of bones, but can you back them up?
So technology is actually getting really good with that because the old method was we did what's called mold and cast. So we put a type of resin on top. It would harden. We'd peel it off, and then we could keep pouring resin in it and making copies to hand out to museums. With 3D technology now, as long as we we have a type of camera that can get all the contours, that's why that skull's back there. That's a 3D model of the actual bear skull. So
sick.
that's kind of
Fire.
that's what I've been seeing a lot of museums being like, we want this because then we can scan it and then we can save it. We also have it archived, so if someone wants to do research and they're from China, they don't have to fly to New Jersey to get the specimen.
Yeah.
Now they can just get the
3D
the
model.
files.
3D thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Would you say
That's crazy.
the 3D print that's behind you? Would you say that's your favorite?
It's one of them. I have 3, maybe 4 if I really get deep, but 2 are what are called mammals. One's a dinosaur, and then the other's an invertebrate. So the giant short-faced bear is definitely one, and then the second one would be what's called Diprotodon.
Okay.
So do you guys know what a wombat is, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I caught one in Pokemon.
Yeah, so a Diprotodon is essentially the size of a bison.
Ooh.
I definitely did not catch
So
one
it
of
was
those.
a bison-sized wombat that just chilled in Australia. It retained Australia's nope status. So
That's why
Okay.
I'm never going to
Is that a real
Australia.
thing?
No,
That's
but
crazy.
I would love to
Do
go to
those still
Australia.
exist? Wombats still exist?
yeah,
Wombats still exist. The giant
I
wombat.
got to pet one in
live.
Australia.
I don't-
It was
I don't live
it
in
was cool.
Australia.
How in the world does a footprint become fossilized? There's been footprints discovered before. How is that a thing?
So generally with fossilization, it's a gamble because you leave things out to the elements. So if something dies, you guys have probably walked in a park or something and saw a dead squirrel or something and it's picked apart. That's generally what a fossil has to do. It has to die. and then you have the elements.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I heard it myself. I'm like, I'm smart. I have a master's degree. But it dies, and then it has to get done with what's called rapid burial, or at least you would hope, because that would preserve the most of it as the like fleshy bits kind of melt away. For things like footprints and trace fossils, generally what happens is that imprint happens, and it just is left unmarred. It can get buried, and then it fills in with sediment, and it kind of lets it sit for a while. But generally when that footprint happens, it probably has to go through the same process as a bone, which is it needs to be covered. Otherwise, it'll get windswept or water washed or any kind of normal clearing you would see.
And how do you discover a footprint? Like you're just digging and you're like, oh, this is a
Half
nice
of the time
curve
it's
right
blind
here.
luck. And I'm not trying to slag. It's literally blind luck. A lot of times it'll be things like farmers or hikers. I know there's a lot of people in paleontology who don't like to give amateurs credit, but amateurs are a huge sector that we rely on because they'll just wander in the middle somewhere where we know that, oh, there might have been some fossils relatively in the area, and then they'll just be kind of moving around and they'll be like, oh shit, I found a bone. When I went to school, there was a area we had to do to learn like geology, and the very last area we had to check out, there's a sauropod, like a long-necked dinosaur's leg bone just sticking about 5 feet out of a rock outcrop. They're like, no one can get it because if we had to try to take it down the hill, it's a death toboggan. Literally it was just a student who went around to make a what we call strike and dip. So we'd take measurements to know where beds of rocks sit. He kind of came around the corner and was like, oh shit, that's a bone. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's been there. So, like, for 30 years now, people just go, yeah, bone, and we move on. But, yeah, it's just people blindly find them. And then, or if you are a little more familiarized with the area, then you do what's called gridding. And you make, like, 1 foot by 1 foot squares in, like, a 9-foot square pattern. And then you just kind of slowly dig. Archaeology does it, too, where you kind of, like, try to find it. Because a big thing is we try to find them and then record them as they sit. Because it can tell us so much just by how those bones are sitting. So, in Jurassic Park, you have that raptor with its, like, back bent, and everyone's like, oh, it's so cool. What that tells me is, oh, it died naturally, and it went through rigor mortis, and it, like, because it's spine pulled.
I have a very, I guess, dark question. Is, like, while you guys are digging for these bones and these, like, fossil bones for dinosaurs, have you guys ever come across, like, really, really old human bones?
Yeah, that has happened. So
Do you call the cops?
No, if it's past like 100 years, then it either becomes archaeology's territory or paleo territory.
Oh, do you have to fight about it?
It can get petty. If you want to, I could talk about the Bone Wars in a minute. But in Chicago, there's a famous paleontologist named Paul Sereno. He's the one. Maybe you guys know. It's called Super Croc.
No.
It's basically a city bus size crocodile.
Oh.
Was found in Africa.
You can 3D print that.
That's an intern.
So if you had to measure in the studio, just off of the head alone, how big is it?
If I was to give a guess, probably I'd say it'd be from probably the end of this table to a little bit by the skateboard. I would guess somewhat in.
That's just the head.
Yeah. Like I said, the thing was the size of a city bus. Yeah, if you've ever seen Lake Placid, this is essentially the croc in Lake Placid.
So it's safe to say that they're basically like the megalodons of the.
I mean, they were a super predator for sure.
Yeah.
That leads me to another question.
Okay.
Wait, but I
Wait,
wanted
hold on,
to tell me
wait,
why this man. What was the hot take on the super croc?
Hold on,
So-
wait. Before that, Lucci had something he wanted to ask.
Okay.
We'll go down the
All
row.
right.
It's like class.
All right, please. If I sound ignorant, my bad.
You do.
But
I already know you do.
all right, there's only one megalodon, right or wrong?
No, there's
No,
more
there's
megalodons.
There's more
been
megalodons.
There wasn't
so
just
there was
one.
more of them.
He didn't solo
so
everyone.
there was more of this guy too. I thought it was just a
Probably.
1-on-1.
Yeah,
Like that's why I had the
so-
super name.
I don't know the number off the top of my head. I've read it before in articles, but I would say probably found 0.01% of all prehistoric life that was ever around. So everything we're finding is like a fraction of a fraction that was just preserved. So there are like you've got things like Maximo. It's a giant Argentinosaurus. It's the size of basically a football field in length. It's a giant long-necked dinosaur. Yeah, they're huge.
The size of a football field?
Yeah.
Like 100 yards. With or without the touchdowns?
Without. So it's like a Jets.
Oh, that's just small then.
Hey. Just imagine all the
Yeah.
stuff that was
Wait,
pulverized
so-
without any sort of fossilization that happened.
So when I was a kid in high school, I interned at the Field Museum for a group he was running, and he had just made a discovery in Africa. They were looking for dinosaurs, and what they ended up finding were 2 different time periods of people buried.
In the Congo?
No, so Sahara, so just all out there. When he was digging, they were looking for fossils, and then they found this grave site of a person, and it was not a like modern person. So they're like, okay, we're safe there. But they then preserved it because in paleontology we basically just cover everything with a jacket, so it takes the dirt, soil, everything with it. Came back, they found there were like flower petals, so they found out it was a grave site where they did
So somebody
burial
actually,
ritual.
yeah.
Turns out as they were excavating that one, they go further down and they found someone who's several thousand years older buried in the same spot.
But I would think that you would want the whole site so you can actually break down the bits and parts of it instead of doing it there because it's like.
So that's what that grid is for. So as you go out, you're like, okay, I found a big bone. Let's see if I can find anything else. And if you find it like a little bit off to the right, you're like, okay, then we make the next grid, and it keeps going that way. And you kind of explore the area. People have done fossil sites for like 30, 40, 50 years just going back to the same spot because they keep finding things.
Oh.
So, but then there's other times where you just find like a bone and you do a grid for like, several hundred feet.
Where is our nearest paleo dig site?
Big Brook.
Preferably an address. I'll be there tomorrow.
There is one here in Jersey that you can go and do like panhandling and like checking it out, and like it has small marine and shark teeth and stuff like that. The Edelman Fossil Museum, I believe, has an active dig site going on.
Edelman?
Fire.
Yeah, I got.
I'm sure you could look into like volunteering for stuff like that.
Okay, I was a
Oh
kid.
yeah, they love volunteers because they can teach you and you can learn, but then it's free labor.
Yeah.
But now that my question piggybacking off of Grace, do you guys allow the public to volunteer and help you guys out when it comes to an active dig site like that?
So yeah, actually there's a few sites that you let do that. The Mammoth site, it wasn't free. It was you pay, you can come in and you can help excavate stuff. But a lot of places will let like students come in and learn. In Montana, I'm assuming everyone here has seen Jurassic Park, right?
Yes.
So
I was in it.
Oh, were you the kid?
No, I was actually one of the velociraptors.
Oh,
First up, you know what I'm saying?
Legit. Okay. I was Dennis Nedry. But no, in that opening scene where he traumatizes a small child with a raptor claw, that's an actual dig site called Egg Mountain out in Montana. I went and worked on that site.
Oh, nice.
And actually,
So fucking cool.
my
yeah.
wife did too. A lot of my friends did. But it was an active dig site where they found tons of what's called myosaur. It's the loving mother, I think is the technical name. But it's like all these egg deposits and stuff. But when you did this for years, they would have kids come out from local schools and they do digs there. And
That's pretty cool.
now they won't leave you unattended because either someone will walk
Obviously.
off or someone will be like, "Hey, look!" and you're like, "Oh shit, there's $30,000 right there."
Yep.
But-
Oh, how does it work? You find a bone. Who pays you? How does the government pay you for that? The museum?
So kind of it'll either be a museum, it'll be a national park, or it can be a private collector. Paleontologists generally don't like private collectors because for
obvious reasons.
For
yeah.
obvious reasons, like there's a famous one. It's called a Psittacosaurus. So you brought up feathers. So for a long time, probably since the 90s, we've all kind of agreed that dinosaurs, their descendants are birds. And so you started finding fossilized feather evidence. They're like, oh, cool, feathers, yay. We never saw it on the other side of the dinosaur spectrum, which are what are called the ornithischians. So that's the
Can you repeat that again?
ornithischians. So it means bird-hipped.
I can't pronounce
But
that.
they're
Okay.
not bird-hipped. The saurichians, which are the raptors, the theropods, those are the ones that are bird-hipped. So they gave the wrong names to the wrong hips.
Okay.
Those are like Triceratops, Ankylosaur, Stegosaur, the one, the cool plant eaters. We had never found feathers on them or any type of feather. And we're like, well, that's weird. These are all somewhat on the same family tree. That interesting. Come to find out, a fossil of this thing called a Psittacosaur, which had these feather plumes, but they're feather filaments. So it was more like these long hair-like structures. And apparently this dude had had it since like the 80s.
Long
And
hair
it
like
only
that.
came out after he like went broke and gave it away. So if you find it on like a BLM or a federal land or whatever, you have to have the appropriate paperwork with the government. Otherwise, they claim it. That's what caused the whole Sioux, the T-Rex debacle. It was basically
On federal ground.
it basically became a glorified pissing match because it was originally a handshake agreement between a paleontologist in the Black Hills and a farmer. And then when they were like, "Oh, it's the most complete T-Rex ever found," the farmer goes, "Oh, you didn't pay me $1,000. That's mine. Give it to me." And he sued him, and then the government got involved, the tribes got involved. That's our land, and it just turned into a huge legal court battle about who it belonged to, and eventually the feds won. It ended up going to auction, and the Field Museum, in conjunction with McDonald's, bought it, and now it permanently resides at the Field Museum.
That's
Fine.
insane.
And
where's
that's the
it?
most preserved fossil of a T-Rex.
Yeah, it's the most complete.
Where's
Most
the
complete.
Field Museum?
Thank you.
Chicago.
Chicago. Okay.
Okay.
What's fascinating to me is like I didn't think about how much you guys had to learn about dirt
Yeah, I
also
was gonna say
and
that
minerals
too.
because like I love dirt. I know that sounds weird, but like
I
I
can
find that
confirm.
interesting
I can
because I really
confirm.
like clay, like and you know, same thing, different thing, right? So, but you have to learn about all of that because obviously it depends on what kind of dirt, depending because like you can either sit there with like a makeup brush and like brush things away, or like you can kind of like chip away at the dirt to get to the fossil type situation,
Yeah, or we
depending
need
on
jackhammers or shovels, sledgehammers. Like it all really depends on the type of environment. But yeah, a lot of a lot of paleontologists go two routes. They either go the bio side, so that does a lot more of the like theoretical evolution and kind of how things tracked out. And then you have the geology rock nerds who are just like, I want to go outside and dig in the dirt all day.
So
Okay, I'm not sure if this is your department or the geology rock nerds department, but how deep do you go to discover like
Hey.
time?
Excuse me.
You know, like is it like
Like
six?
I keep digging and then like a clock's gonna pop out.
Nah, like I'm saying, like if you dig 6 feet, is this like a representation of like 1,000 years or some shit like that? You know what I'm saying?
So you figure that out through things like what's called sedimentology and stratigraphy. So
You lost me, but all right.
Yeah,
So-
for real.
I'll get you back. I talk to kids, so I got you guys.
Masters in science communication, guys. He will
So-
get the story to us.
So if you guys ever look at like a cake, if you cut a cake in half, you see there's like
I
Yes.
would say we got one here.
So you see there's different layers. There's the actual sponge, and then there's the cream and the filler and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Rocks are very similar. Like depending on over the millions of years how those rocks change, you can have different layers. So if you like say go down 95 and you see rock layers exposed, if you see like a big band of like white or gray or something, and then there's a black band, that'll tell me, okay, there was an environment that made that white band, and then there was another environment hundreds of millions of years before that made the, black band. We get more definitive kind of numbers through things like chemical testing and stuff like that because we have to measure things like either the radiation on it, so that can only go up to like a couple thousand years, or then there's other types of chemical and types of testing, and through years and years of geology research, people kind of know like, oh, this red mudstone that's out here in this area is from this time period. And so that's what gives us the geologic time scale.
But how do you guys know? So I guess this goes. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but how do you know specifically that it's that time period? Like, how do you know that it's like 3,000 years ago if it wasn't at like 6,000 years ago? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So, like, this would definitely go into more like geochemical and like
Okay.
a field that's way outside of my weight class, so to speak.
Okay.
There's tons of different testings that they do, and also like you cite papers. So like paleontology is just like a growing organism itself.
okay.
So 200 years ago we thought they were tail dragging, cold blooded. An iguanodon had a thumb spike on its nose, and then you kind of get, as you do more and more research and through the process of science, which is literally an evolving process of disproving or proving something is
Okay.
real or right. As you go through that, then you're like, oh, T-Rex didn't drag its tail. Oh, based on its hips, it actually is tipped over.
Yeah,
It's got
and
a
it's like
counterweight.
yeah,
it's
like
like a cat.
even, right? Like
Right.
50-50, yeah.
Yeah, and then so that's
okay,
how.
okay.
Yeah. The best one I could ever recommend on your personal time is look up Iguanodon and just see the sci-fi movie that thing went through.
Yeah, I also heard a lot of people talk shit about the T-Rex arms, but they were able to lift, if I'm not mistaken, like 600 pounds, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were
But they're
little-
tiny though.
Yeah, they were
I
tiny,
just-
but they were
I just
strong
don't
as shit,
see it
though.
Because if they're like this and something's falling on them,
Or if
How
they
they-
fall, how
how
the
they
hell
gonna
do
have
they get
enough
up?
force?
they roll
like,
over. They just
yeah.
kind
Hold
of
that
they
up.
have
They
legs.
got a
that
strong
are
ass neck,
super
too.
thick. Yeah, he's actually not wrong. They are. There's research that people looked into to kind of be like, why is it this thing and Carnotaurus, some of the other big meat eaters, have these little tiny arms? But then you have like Allosaurus and other ones that have normal long grabbing arms. The theory is that if you look, their scapulas and their necks get more robust and thick, so it can give a bigger and stronger bite force.
Ooh.
So they sacrificed being able to like grip with their fingers and hands for the chance to just crush in one shot.
Crushing
Christ.
one shot sounds wild.
Yeah.
Bro.
So the T-Rex has the strongest recorded bite force based on like how we measure it with like advanced math that I was not good at. But like they do a lot of calculations to measure out that bite force, but then you add in that each tooth is like the size of a steak knife.
Can you compare that bite force to a bite force of a
Agrees.
hippo?
So a hippo would be squished. It would pop like a water balloon. That's a lot of things. Like the short-faced bear behind me. That skull is designed for bone crushing because they don't have time to gently pick apart the meat. They're just going after it for food.
Have you ever discovered 2 dinosaurs in battle that were killed, like in the middle of battle? Or I don't know if that's something that would be easy to, you know.
So there's a few. The one that I always go to is it's a Protoceratops. So it's one of the Triceratops, Ceratopsian, like frill, beak, 4 legs. So that thing was probably the size of, I want to say, like a bulldog or a pit bull, and a velociraptor that were buried at the same time, but they were literally trapped in mid-fight. So the Protoceratops has its arm, the raptor's arm in its mouth, and the raptor's kicking at its stomach. There it is. But it's believed that they were buried under like a dune in Mongolia, collapsing on itself.
Oh, so they were in the middle of fight, and then they just
Yeah.
collapsed on them, and they just died because
That's
of
how
it.
they
The
were
size
found.
of these things are really tripping me off. Like this thing is a pit bull versus basically a chicken.
That's how they were
More
found.
or less, yeah. Yeah, that was how they were found. As they
Why
slowly
did they make
excavated
them
it.
seem like they were all of them were massive?
Well, I mean, we even have that in the animal kingdom today. We have
That looks
giraffes,
pretty
but then we
good,
also have, Yorkies and things like that.
That looks
But we
pretty.
weren't taught that growing up. Growing up, they made it seem like everything was.
We weren't taught
huge.
a lot of
We
things.
weren't taught a lot of things, but they did make all the dinosaurs seem like they were massive, huge, 6 feet wingspans and all. Like I'm sure, obviously, there were those.
It generally
but-
was because the big ones were the first ones found.
that makes sense.
Well, because those are easier to be preserved per se because of how massive the bones are and the density.
That, and also they were just more marketable. So,
Okay.
like, the East Coast was where the fossil rush started. And,
Oh, really?
we had evidence of it long before. There's a geologist named Steno from, like, the 1600s in Italy. He found, like, giant megalodon teeth, and he was like, there's these big dragons that lived in the sea. And they're like, okay, go have your spaghetti. And they just ignored him until his stuff actually, like, everyone's like, oh, shit, he was right about some stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have like Thomas Jefferson. He, president, wrote the Declaration of Independence. He also was a paleontologist. He was the one who in North America
Really?
coined mammoth.
What was the coolest thing you ever found?
I was just about to ask that.
I'd say probably the coolest thing was I found a Tyrannosaur tooth.
How long have you been doing this?
Let's see. You had me do math now.
Threes and fours, man.
So I mean, I did. I technically started school, college at 18 to do paleontology, but I've been, collecting fossils or doing stuff like that since I was probably 6. So
cool.
Okay, so professionally, how long are you doing it?
professionally, I would say 14 years or so.
Okay.
Nice.
Do you believe that everything that a scientist does should be replicated and be actually done?
So science is all about growing and exploring. That's a big thing.
Yes.
And there are going to be errors, there are going to be mess ups. I think there is an ethical due diligence you need to do. We've seen that with things like splitting the atom. It wasn't done in energy pursuit. It was done in how can we bomb the shit out of somebody. Same kind of principle.
America.
Yeah, exactly. But like the dire wolf and the mammoth thing is a great thing because it's like, okay, if we do this type of thing, what is the ethical responsibility of bringing that thing into this world? Because
Yeah.
this is no longer the planet it lived on. It's not the environment it lived
Well,
on.
that's
Yeah,
why I was
that's what I'm
asking. Do you
saying.
believe that should it be done? Not just the direwolf thing, just in general. Like, should scientists really dig that deep in?
I mean, as long as they have some form of ethical protections, like they need to know where the line is. I think you should explore all the way up to and just about crossing that line. But if you cross it into, you know, you're now going to bring something into this planet where it's like, okay, do we have to habitate it now? Is it going to live its entire existence behind a zoo wall?
Is it going to murder us?
Exactly.
Does it eat humans, you know?
But, like, progress has to happen. You just have to... Scientists, and a lot of them are. That's the problem, is the media always makes us sound like we're either the most, like, dry, draconian, apolitical, apathetic humans who are just like, if they die, they die.
Oh, my God.
And you're like, Jesus Christ, we were just looking to see if we could cure polio. But then you also have the ones who do want to push things forward. Tesla was one of those people. He discovered a way to do electricity and wanted to make it a public utility. But because he was so idealistic and not very business-centered, he crashed out, lost all his patents. You had Thomas Edison basically swoop in and take everything and then make a giant industry out of it. That's kind of the thing, is scientists can be idealistic, but they also have to have realism. Same thing with, we can use this CRISPR. This is great. We could use it to look at things like diseases and other problems. But CRISPR's already been criticized because there's rich people who want designer babies. They're like, I don't want my baby to have brown hair. I want it to be blonde and look like Dolph Lundgren out the womb. And they're like, no, how about you just have a baby? And they're like, no, it needs to be like 100% pretty. So it's a fine line, and that's where like more conversations need to happen, and that's why the public needs to be involved. And it's also why I don't like certain media representations of scientists, because everyone thinks that we're just like in a white lab coat being dicks all day. When half the time it's just like autistic nerds and ADHD people like me running around being like...
Hey, you're pretty cool.
Yeah, I like to think so.
I'll fuck with you, dog.
But like half the time I'm like, do you want to know about this cool dinosaur fact? And then I'll literally spend an hour telling you about the lore of Transformers. Like,
why exactly are they doing the dire wolf thing? Like, why are they doing it for funsies or?
It's a private company, so they probably want a lot of money and investment. If you look at like things like the Endangered Species Act and a couple of organizations who like look at actual conservation, they're like, we could do this with a couple $100 million to like help keep habitats and stuff safe. This group is like, well, if we kill them, it's a redo. We can load the last save file. We can bring it back.
Control V.
Yeah, but
Control V.
as a business, I always generally have a leery eye because I'm like, what do you want out of this? It's not for the general public. It's what do you get out of it?
So are paleontologists like, do you technically work for yourself, or do you find places?
You find places. So you can work for museums, you can work for the government, you can work for the could have worked for the National Park System.
I like how you said could have. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
I have friends who no longer have jobs, so I'm a little sensitive to that subject. But you can work for a lot of nonprofits, you can work for scientific institutions, colleges always like having us around because we either teach vertebrate just anatomy. And then they're like, well, what are you going to do for the summer? I'm like, I'm going to go out to Wyoming and just dig in a field.
Is it hard to find work?
It is. It's a very limited
You can't go on like Indeed and just like paleontologist.
I mean, you can. Like, that's how my wife got us out here to New Jersey. She was getting her PhD in Nebraska. And when she was getting
a doctor.
Oh, yeah. She's the looks, the brains, the talent. I cook. So
I had a question, too,
Yeah, go
about
ahead.
do you think that your profession is, especially in the media, is like glamorized a little bit? That there's like parts of the job, like, yeah, the digging is fun, but there's like a whole bunch of other stuff that people don't see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, good question.
There is a lot. Like, that's why I kind of, you know, if you talk to me sometimes outside of work or this type of situation, I'm like, hey, or I'm just grumpy as shit and I don't want to talk to anybody. But
Sounds like the rest of us.
But that's what I kind of do out to go out here and talk about this stuff. Is I want to bring the attention of there are dedicated scientists. They love what they do. They do so many cool things. There's people who do things like they cut fossils in half and do like X-ray examination, and you can like
grafts.
it looks at like blood vessels and stuff that like make those thin sections, so you can actually see like the hollow bones of a raptor and stuff like that.
I forgot where I was going there.
So I want to piggyback off of that and how you brought up that you want to bring attention to this. Have you thought about like bringing it more to like social media and, you know, doing like clips and doing segments?
So yeah, there's actually there's a movement now in the paleosphere. There's a few of us that like as much as I love the professors that I learned from, they are a level of knowledge that I don't think we'll have in the field quite like that again. They're the type of guy who can walk out, look at a rock, and go, something's in there, and you're like, how the fuck? What? It's a rock.
Yeah.
But
He's like, break it in half. I bet you something fucking in there.
But a lot of them were like, okay, I put it up in the museum exhibit or I post my research. I'm done. I'm out. And a lot of us have been like, no, we need to be on social media more. We need to be presenting ourselves. We need to expand it to the international community because that's a whole other subject.
I hate to cut this short because I really, really, really would love. I would love to have him back. I don't know about
Yes,
you
but
guys.
before he goes, can show and tell.
Absolutely.
You have a fossil to show. No,
I have
you
tons
have
of
you
stuff.
have.
Oh man,
Yay.
it's your
Everybody
time
pay
to
attention.
shine, brother.
Yes. Okay. So let's do that.
You're talking about it.
Is that
That's a
turtle?
Horseshoe.
It's fragile, but that's
the hell's a
something
horseshoe?
Yeah.
Don't let anyone touch
That's
it.
a horseshoe crab?
Yep. That's a female horseshoe crabhead. If you flip it over, you can actually see the soft
Be
material.
very
that
careful
made it
and
up.
pass it
I
around.
never
Be
know
very
that.
careful.
These
and
things
pass it
bleed
around.
blue, right?
Yes, and they're used to kind
They
of
bleed
test
blue.
clotting and
They
medical
crips.
stuff.
I was saying they actually help with a lot of medicines, if I'm not mistaken.
Question:
correct?
Are these the eyes?
Yes.
How often?
No flexing. They
how,
didn't lift.
how often do you find fossils in ice?
We find frozen animals. You have permafrost creatures. You have the cave lion, the cave bear. You have the mammoth that was found in also, like Siberia is where you're gonna find them.
The
right?
Last Airbender.
But like, if they do they get preserved a lot better in the cold? Like if
So
they're-
they'll preserve their soft tissue. So that's why, like with we have climate change and the planet's warming up. They're starting to thaw out, and people are able to go into those areas, and now they're finding these animals basically with their skin and their meat and everything
Fur
on
and
it.
all,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's fucking crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and then you have things like
Is their DNA then more compact?
so they'll have more complete DNA because like you can't pull it from this because all
Okay.
that organic material is pulled
Gone.
out.
Okay.
But they will find parts of it in those, but they still degrade. These are thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of year creatures that you know.
Yeah, it's almost ceasing.
Yeah, you can follow me on most social media. I'm under either Inspire Just One, TikTok. I'm under the Source Thesaurus, or you can find me on other platforms just as Zach.
Wait, what is a shabuti?